There is a quiet tremor that lives beneath the surface of many lives, an unseen pulse that stirs whenever someone comes too close, looks too deeply, or listens too carefully. It is the fear of being truly seen. Not the version shaped for safety. Not the face polished for approval. But the unedited self that hides behind practiced expressions and carefully chosen words. This fear does not shout. It whispers. It lingers in the pauses between conversations, in the way a person lowers their eyes, in the instinct to retreat just as connection begins. Everyone carries a story. And for many, the most fragile part of that story is the self they have spent years protecting. This is a journey into that quiet fear, its origins, its psychology, its echoes, and the slow, tender process of returning home to oneself. Chapter 1. The first tremor. There is a moment, often so small it slips past unnoticed, when a person senses themselves pulling away. A question is asked. A compliment lingers too long. A silence becomes too open. And something inside tightens, as if an invisible hand has reached toward a place that has long been guarded. The fear of being seen rarely appears dramatically. It arrives in gestures, the sudden shift of posture, the glance toward the floor, the practiced smile that hides uncertainty. It shows up when someone asks, "Are you okay?" and the truth rises but never travels far enough to be spoken. There is an instinct to retreat, to cover, to step back into the safety of what feels familiar. For many, this fear forms quietly around the edges of their everyday lives. It is in the way they choose words carefully, weighing how they will land. In the way they reveal only fragments of their stories, never the full shape. In the way they watch others connect effortlessly and wonder why their own heart feels heavy at the thought of being known. This first tremor is not about shame or weakness. It is about protection, an ancient reflex the body learned long before it understood language. A small, subtle alert that whispers, "Stay hidden. It's safer." Yet beneath this tremor lives another truth, a quiet longing to be understood without performance, to be held without pretense, to be seen without fear. A longing that never disappears, even when the fear grows stronger. This chapter stands at the threshold, the place where a person becomes aware of the invisible barrier between who they are and who they allow the world to meet. Chapter 2. Where the hiding began. Hiding rarely begins in adulthood. It begins in rooms where a child once learned the cost of being fully themselves. Sometimes it was a sharp word. A disappointed look. A moment when their joy was too loud, their tears too much, their needs too inconvenient. Small moments, easily dismissed by others, but deeply recorded by a young mind still learning what earns love and what risks losing it. For some, the lesson came quietly. Praise was given for being agreeable, composed, responsible beyond their years. So they learned how to smooth their edges, silence their discomfort, perfect their presentation. Not out of deceit, but out of hope that being the right version of themselves would keep them safe, accepted, wanted. For others, the world felt unpredictable. Emotions in their home shifted like weather, warm one moment, distant the next. So they learned to scan the room, to read the moods of others before acknowledging their own. Their authenticity became something to protect, tucked away where it could not be criticized or misunderstood. The origins of hiding often feel ordinary. Nothing catastrophic. Just a series of moments that taught the nervous system to protect the self by dividing it, the self that feels, and the self that is shown. This split becomes a survival strategy long before it becomes a burden. And by the time someone reaches adulthood, the mask feels natural, even essential. The world meets the version shaped by years of adaptation, while the deeper self waits quietly in the background, alive, untouched, longing. This chapter traces the earliest footsteps of that pattern, revealing how the fear of being seen begins not in weakness, but in childhood attempts at staying safe. Chapter 3. The psychology of the mask. The fear of being seen is not merely emotional. It is biological, woven into the architecture of the human nervous system, shaped by evolution, memory, and the deep need to belong. The brain is built to scan for danger. Not just physical threats, but social ones. Rejection, humiliation, misunderstanding, these experiences activate the same neural circuits that respond to physical pain. To the mind, being judged feels like being harmed. Being exposed feels like standing unarmed. So the brain creates defenses, carefully curated behaviors, micro-adjustments in tone, rehearsed reactions. These become the mask, though it never feels like one. It feels like protection, an instinctive strategy managed by regions of the brain responsible for survival. The amygdala warns against vulnerability. The prefrontal cortex crafts the safest possible version of oneself. The body tenses as if preparing for impact. Psychologists call this impression management or self-protective inhibition, the tendency to withhold truth in order to avoid emotional risk. But beneath the terminology lies something simple, the desire to be accepted without being hurt. Attachment theory offers another layer. Those who grew up with unpredictable or conditional acceptance often develop hyper-awareness of how others perceive them. Their system becomes finely tuned to signs of disapproval, making authenticity feel risky, even when logic says it is safe. Over time, these protective patterns become automatic. People forget they are hiding. They confuse the mask with their identity, believing the curated version is the only version others can tolerate. This chapter reveals the internal machinery behind the fear, how the mind, in its effort to protect, sometimes builds walls around the very self that longs to be known. Chapter 4, The War Within. There is a quiet conflict that unfolds inside a person who fears being seen. A struggle between two opposing forces, the longing to be understood, and the instinct to remain hidden. On one side lives the desire for closeness, the wish to be known without translation, to be met without masking. This desire appears in subtle moments, the warmth felt while listening to someone share their truth, the comfort of being around those who invite sincerity, the ache that rises when connection feels possible. On the other side is the familiar pull of self-protection. The reflex to retreat the moment vulnerability approaches. The mind generates questions. What if they misunderstand? What if I'm too much? What if they see something that makes them leave? These worries are not dramatic, they are persistent, looping through the nervous system like quiet alarms. The conflict is exhausting. A person may open slightly, then close again. They may offer a glimpse of their inner world, then spend hours replaying every word, analyzing each detail as if authenticity were a mistake. There is a constant negotiation between wanting to step forward and fearing the consequences of doing so. This internal war is rarely visible to others. On the outside, the person may appear calm, capable, self-contained. But inside, two truths pull against each other, the human need for connection and the human fear of exposure. This chapter lingers in that tension, the painful, beautiful contradiction of wanting to be seen while fighting every instinct that tries to prevent it. Chapter 5, When the Light Finds You. Turning points seldom announce themselves. They rarely appear as sudden revelations or dramatic shifts. More often, they arrive softly, through a moment that feels ordinary at first glance. Perhaps it happens in a conversation where the truth slips out before the mind can censor it. A confession made in a tired voice. A story told with less caution than usual. And instead of judgment, there is understanding. Instead of distance, there is warmth. Something inside pauses, confused by the absence of danger. Or the turning point may come alone, in the quiet of a late night where the weight of hiding feels heavier than the risk of being known. The body grows tired of holding everything in. The mind grows weary of rehearsing, shaping, containing. There is a moment when the cost of staying invisible becomes undeniable. Sometimes it is grief that brings the realization. Loss has a way of stripping away pretense, revealing what matters in ways the mind can no longer ignore. In these moments, a person may see clearly how much of their life has been lived in fear, how many connections softened, how many opportunities dimmed, how many truths swallowed for the sake of safety. The turning point is not transformation. It is recognition. A quiet awareness that the strategies once used for survival have begun to feel like constraints. A small but profound shift, the realization that being seen, while frightening, might also be a doorway to something truer. This chapter captures the delicate moment when the armor cracks just enough for light to enter. Chapter 6, Learning to Stand Uncovered. Healing the fear of being seen does not arrive with certainty or sudden courage. It begins with subtler moments, gentle experiments in honesty, small acts of presence, brief pauses where the old reflex to hide slows just enough to choose differently. At first, these moments feel uncomfortable. Not wrong, just unfamiliar. A person may speak a truth they usually soften. They may hold eye contact a moment longer than their instinct suggests. They may allow their voice to tremble without disguising it.
These are not grand gestures. They are micro-openings, fragile and sincere.
With each small step, the nervous system learns something new, that vulnerability does not always lead to harm, that authenticity can breathe without collapsing, that some people respond with tenderness rather than judgment.
Over time, the body begins to recalibrate. The shoulders lower. The breath deepens.
The mind becomes more willing to release its tight grip on self-protection, understanding that safety can coexist with exposure.
Not perfectly, not consistently, but enough. Integration is not about becoming fearless. It is about becoming familiar with the feeling of being seen. Letting it exist without panic. Letting connection unfold without immediate retreat. There will still be days of hiding, days when the old patterns return.
But healing means recognizing these moments with compassion rather than shame.
It means noticing the instinct to withdraw and whispering inwardly, "It's okay. We're learning."
This chapter explores the slow, human process of softening, allowing the real self to emerge in pieces, gently held, gradually trusted, quietly reclaiming its place at the center of one's life. Chapter 7, The Soft Unveiling. In the end, being seen is not a dramatic reveal. It is a soft unveiling, an accumulation of small moments where the real self is allowed to exist without retreat. There is no spotlight, no grand confession, no sudden transformation. Just a gradual loosening, like sunlight slowly warming a room that has lived too long in shade. The fear does not vanish.
It becomes quieter, less commanding.
It learns to sit beside the person instead of standing guard in front of them.
What once felt like danger begins to feel like possibility.
Being seen means allowing others to witness the imperfect rhythm of a human heart, its hesitations, its hopes, its unpolished truths. It means understanding that authenticity is not performance, it is presence.
A way of existing that asks for nothing more than honesty in its simplest form.
As the unveiling continues, something unexpected emerges, a sense of ease.
Not constant, but real.
The ease of speaking without rehearsing, feeling without filtering, connecting without shrinking. The ease of realizing that the self, in all its complexity, was never unworthy of being known.
There is beauty in this quiet openness. Not the beauty of perfection, but the beauty of sincerity.
The kind that grows when someone stops hiding from their own reflection and begins living from the center rather than the edges.
This final chapter rests in that truth, that the fear of being seen is, at its core, a yearning to be seen correctly, gently, wholeheartedly, and without distortion. And when that yearning is finally met, even in small doses, the world feels a little softer. The self feels a little freer. And life becomes something that can be lived, not just protected from.